Excellent.
Yep, we are live. Yep. So welcome all to the LitRPG on Earth and Beyond panel. I'm the mod, Zack Risley, and with me I've got Joseph. Apologies. I've got Joseph Phelps, I've got RK Billiau, and I've got DJ Bodden here. If you guys could go around maybe in that order and just kind of discuss, do a quick introduction and maybe talk about your works for a moment.
Sounds good. I'm Joseph Phelps. I'm the author of the Blacklight Chronicles, starting with Illusion. Book 2 is Delusion. This is a VR MMO, in-game, out-game story. First one takes place in a Grand Theft Auto style game world. The second one in a Red Dead Redemption style game world. I am following in the footsteps of a wonderful software company that inspired me deeply. However, I am branching out from that main series with a serial that I'm writing right now that should be showing up on Roller Road in a couple months here. So look out for that. It's a system apocalypse. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Very nice. I'm RK Billiau, also Pixelate Books. I wrote the Primeverse trilogy, which is a isekai VR MMO where basically the characters die and wake up. It's very VGO, where the characters die and wake up inside of the world of Primeverse. It's a complete trilogy. I've also written a short story for Tao Wong's System Apocalypse, and my main claim to fame right now is the Accidental Minecraft Family, a gamelit series for kids, about 8 to 12. I've got 18 books in the series out right now, and there's a new one that comes out every month.
That's awesome.
Cool. Hey folks, I'm DJ Bodden. I'm currently broadcasting from Geneva, Switzerland. That's why it's a little darker in my room than it is in the others. And I write in the Viridian Gate Online series. I did the short story Final Kindness, and that led into the Illusionist series. I'm also working on Portal Mage with James, and working on the Gentleman's War Kickstarter, as well as novella and cards. And then I also write in the Fivefold Universe, some LitRPG elements in both. Yep, I love Viridian Gate Online too. Just happy to be here and talking about the wonderful world of LitRPG.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. What we'd like to get into, I'm just going to start off real quick with a pretty simple question. And I'd like to know, so I guess for me personally, the best fantasies always have some kind of a foothold in reality, right? So something that maybe kind of just anchors the reader into the world. My question is, what aspects of everyday life do you tie into your works that will draw and immerse that reader into LitRPG? Things from the everyday.
We going in order again?
Yes.
Okay. So I typically focus on dialogue mostly, heavy characterization, make them feel and sound like people when you're part of the conversation that's happening in a book instead of just experiencing it on the side. It tends to bring in that immersion and place the people where they're supposed to be. Topical things in dialogue help a lot as well.
So in my Primeverse trilogy, talking about things from every day, one of the things I tried to do was make the system so that literally everything you can do is a skill. And so one of the first things the characters look at is there's this massive list of unending things, everything from, how to raise a kid, babysitting it's a skill that you can raise all the way up to level 100. So I try to incorporate, hey, everything can be a skill. So that ends up making me have to do a lot of research on what can be, implemented, but I'm going to put in as much as I can. And then with Minecraft, of course, it's Minecraft. So there's always a lot of stuff that I have to put in terms of research for that. I have to spend a lot of time actually logging into the game and playing to figure stuff out there.
It's the best kind of research.
Yes.
So when it came to VGO, One of the things that's a little bit different about my series is for the main series, everything on the real world gets wiped out by an asteroid by probably the second chapter. But mine happens a year before that. So there are actually real world elements that are impinging on the game. Like people are trying to basically wipe the character from the game from the outside for real world commercial reasons. I try to dig into, everyone has a persona that they like to embody in the game. And I try to dig into what is it in the real world that makes them that way. What real world skills, what real world personality traits have kind of driven them to be this kind of character. Sometimes, opposite from what they really are. And I like, because I work in tech in my day job, I like to bring in the actual hardware aspects to the VR MMORPG in terms of how does an AI actually work? If there is an overmind in this case, there's this role and this persona they embody in the game, obviously, but what part of the computer do they actually control, right? So if they're the overmind of creation, then they're probably a GAN network that's being run through the GPU. If they're running analytics and keeping outside intrusion out, they're probably the virus software and the firewall. So trying to tie in real world and fictional, I think can make something really rich, especially if you apply the kind of the real rules of science fiction, which is show don't tell, right? So I don't need to tell you what gates are involved or the logic, but if I can tie those things together, it just makes it a little bit more real and consistent.
Absolutely, and thanks everybody. Fantastic answers. I think we are also open to any kind of questions. So if anyone in the audience has any questions for these fantastic authors, please let us know. We're watching the comments, and I'll be sure to pass those along. Another quick kind of easy question, kind of one of those standards is, what sci-fi or Earth-based lit RPG is your favorite? Kind of barring your own works, obviously, right?
I'm going to say my favorite is the System Apocalypse series. I got to write in it, but it's also, I just absolutely love the entire concept of it. I think Tao did a great job with it, and I love how it goes from on Earth all the way out into space, and the space arc of it is probably my favorite of any of the lit RPG stuff I've read. I wish there was more sci-fi lit RPG, but it's just not one of those things that gets enough readers right now. As the genre grows, I expect there to be more readers so that so you will get more good sci-fi lit RPG. But for right now, I love that entire system. In fact, so much that I decided my next big person book, since I read a lot of kids' books, my next big person book is actually a System Apocalypse book also with a side helping of cultivation. That should be out in December too. So I love the genre of System Apocalypse, and when they start on Earth and go out and expand, it's just like my dream right there.
I was going to mention System Apocalypse because it's an iconic one. And of course, I'm mildly obsessed with the System Apocalypse at the moment. So that one. And then I also really enjoyed Stardivers, the way that they presented. Oh,
Stephen Landry?
Yes, yeah. The way that they presented the tech and then immediately proceed to show you what it's worth. I love that aspect. And just jumping around from element to element, the racing scene in that one. Yes, more of that, right? That's just almost like showcasing the tech. I love doing that kind of stuff, reading that kind of stuff. So that's those two I would put in my favorites.
The one I really got stuck into was one of the first ones I read in lit RPG period, was Awaken Online. I liked the real world dynamics in terms of the tech company making money and having to support your family, and that whole, the issues that were going on in the real world. But fundamentally, any lit RPG, short of some VR lit RPGs, are sci-fi, right? I mean, we're dealing with a future world that is enabled by technology. So I think you're right that far future and space opera and like the fight, build, mine, and trade type models. I haven't seen a lot of that per se. I've seen a little bit more on the military sci-fi stuff. You know, one of the things that really comes to mind is System Shock. Like System Shock was an interactive LitRPG essentially, because you were running around driving stats, but it was set in the world. I know it was a video game and not a book, but I think all forms of fiction are valid in this, where you really were kind of dealing with crunchy numbers and that. And for me, that was pretty cool. There's also Strife, which was more of a gamelet type, which was like if you take System Shock on one end and you take Doom on the other, Strife was smack in the middle. I think that was a lot of fun.
System Shock is an excellent call out.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I love like the level up books too, where it's, you know, you've got this system and it's like a dude in the real world and he's just like going about his everyday life, but he's got a system involved. Those always fascinate me too.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so we've got another question here. Looks like we've got a question from Dawn Chapman. Hi, Dawn. What is your favorite sci-fi concept or kind of trope or theme that maybe blends into LitRPG stories, right?
That's a difficult one. For me, my favorite sci-fi concept is the Uplift saga from David Brin. That's where species are plucked and developed into sapient creatures and then go forth and be part of this galactic community. That kind of thing I'm hoping to work into a little bit of my own system apocalypse, but we'll see how I can merge those systems. That one right there, David Brin, Uplift. That was an amazing sci-fi concept for me.
I'm a huge fan. I know someone already mentioned it in the chat of the Bobiverse style book. Man, those are so good. Mm-hmm. I just fell in love with it. The concept is just really, really fun. It's really extremely narrative heavy until he starts, you know, making more of his own copies and they start talking to each other. But that's a really fun style of sci-fi. And then also my probably my favorite sci-fi author is Peter F. Hamilton and the Commonwealth Saga. Those books are just mind-blowingly good. And the first book where they develop ships that use portal technology to achieve their FTL, I just was just like, man, that's so cool. You know, it's a really fun concept. And then he just like goes deep into hey, you have these crystals where you're, you know, storing backup copies of yourself. So if you die, your clone takes over. And then you've got people that come into existence and they live in multiple bodies at the same time, you know, a hive mind kind of thing. I just love his stuff. And so, you know, it's kind of space opera-y, but they're short trilogies. I mean, short, they're 1,000 pages each, but, you know, they're still really, really good.
For me, in terms of sci-fi concepts that I've always loved, it's the Garden of Eden creation kit, right? It's this idea that you land in a situation that you're not familiar with, and you have to start from basic building blocks and move all the way up, which is applicable to Minecraft or Terraria or was it Subnautica? Yeah. Subnautica is pretty awesome.
Subnautica, yeah.
And I think you know, I brought it into my sci-fi series, the Fivefold Universe. There's this thing called an anthropological restoration kit, where basically it takes your real world skills, it turns them into numbers, and then depending on what you want to learn, it builds a curriculum for you to learn. For example, if you want to be a pistolier, it builds, you know, range time and active shooting and learning how to use different weapons and learning.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
Over tables.
Yeah.
So you build that up over time. If you want to be a pilot, it takes you through all those things. And then your score kind of gradually increases based off a real world basis. So it'd be a little bit like EVE Online, where your real world use of it is kind of an amalgamate of all your stats in different proficiencies within that discipline. So I think that's really a fun concept, as is really the having the little build a block thing that can make anything from anything, where you land on a planet and you have to build something complicated from base elements. I just love anything that makes a character have to learn new things and be resourceful.
I love the EVE Online call out, because that's a wonderful leveling system to draw from.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Those fantastic answers. I think we've got another question here from a Facebook user. It says a question came in. How do you approach faster than light travel? Like, do you use existing theories such as like, man, I'm not going to pronounce this right, the Alcubierre drive?
No.
Was that wrong? Was that wrong, DJ? Is that what?
No.
That's
It sounds right, but I don't.
Yeah.
Typically, just borrow from what's already there and then expand upon it. If someone's already familiar with, say, the FTL from Firefly, perfect example. They ever bother explaining it? No, they just use it. So you can get away with almost anything if you want to. But the further you go into it, if you use things like the unpronounceable drive, that's excellent for readers that know about it, and it doesn't hurt the readers that don't. They might learn something new. Who knows, right? So I say go for it, but really FTL is one of those things that is delightfully open. So
I'm going to have to say the absolute best FTL that you can find is the Infinite Improbability Drive from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
So good.
Yes.
So, nothing's really going to be able to beat that.
Yeah, isn't it scientifically accurate as best as we can tell, too? Is that whole once you get faster than light, you're literally everywhere at the same time?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That guy is excellent author. Inspiration to us all, I'm sure.
So I went the nerdy route. I talked to a couple astrophysicists, and I have a PhD in math who specialized in physics, who works in my company, and I bug him all the time. The couple that and yes, the math does check from the questions. I actually run most of my space stuff on a second by second spreadsheet using physics equations. But the main ones that I've enjoyed have been Mass Effect, where you're creating a gravitational pull just in front of the ship. That if you can accept the existence of gravitons and being able to create a gravitational field, it does actually bypass relativity pretty neatly. I do like warp gates, not because they're realistic, but because they create choke points.
Same here.
And anything that creates a choke point creates conflict, right? So if you can only go through certain passageways, then that's flipping awesome for a writer. I think in terms of the Ender universe, there it was just, we're going to freeze you and you're going to pop out 50 years later and we don't care about the consequences. I think that's kind of reflective of the old school sci-fi as well. And if you look at Robinson's Aurora, where he was dealing with like the ship, a generation ship going through like 100 years of transit and many generations of people being born and dying and having like kind of island effects and people kind of regressing to older states of humanity. I think that was kind of cool as well, where it's not FTL, but it is interstellar in a realistic and very painful way. The way it works in the Fivefold universe is essentially I took the fourth dimension, and it's a little bit similar to what Weber did in the Omniverse, where I took the fourth dimension as something that you move through by applying power. And essentially, I added a certain level of thickness to different parts of the universe. So let's say that if you activate your jump drive, I won't get into the specifics, but you activate your jump drive in a certain spot, maybe it moves time a little bit faster, you accelerate a little bit faster, it still does the same wear and tear on your engine. But if you do it in a specific spot, for the same amount of an energy expenditure, you're going to get a lot more push for your bang. And that means that those jump points would allow you to cross the space between stars in 2 weeks or 3 days instead of a year. And then there are certain points that are so thin that basically have kind of a fulcrum between them, like a supermassive black hole or something that makes it balance between, where if you activate in one place, you instantly pop out the other end. And finding those and connecting that into a network is kind of what drives FTL within my universe. It also drives the value of a planet, because these these places are hard to find. So on the one hand, you have, is the planet habitable, right? And is the system mineral rich? But then you also have, how many connections does this system have to other places in the universe? And as new connections get discovered, the entire political and economic structure of a star cluster can change, because you just realize you're now connected to the home system of your greatest foe, or to this really mineral rich planet. And I think that can make things a lot more interesting, especially once you start considering trade.
You have to make sure you have your HOV sticker if you're going to go through those faster portals.
So what I do is, on the faster portals, one, you get taxed by the federal government.
See, you got to have that sticker.
They're neutral zones, right? But only a certain size of engine can get you through them, right? It takes, there's a threshold. So smaller ships have to dock with bigger ships. Large ships in that context can travel faster than smaller ships. And again, it's on a longer path. So one of the things I pushed forward in the third book was, there was a central system that didn't have any of these fast gates. But if you wanted to regroup the resources of all 5 systems that were connected to it through slow gates, it would actually take less time than taking the fast gates to each of the systems, because you'd only have to go through real space for one of them. And that creates, again, a trade imbalance where it's more sensible to regroup the goods at one place, buy them there, and then go back to your planet than it is to go to all 5 systems. So yeah, I mean, FTL is great. Real world implications of FTL, like in BattleTech, I love BattleTech. The Comstar monopoly on FTL, it creates this entire problematic in the universe, and then it forces choices. And I think that's what's really cool, is discovering those choices.
Yeah, FTL is always going to be a critical part of your world building, how it works, why. If you bought it, like I did a short story with a video game in space, and I was just like, I'm not building something for this. It's fine to use FTL. It's a video game in space. But when you do the detail orientation like that, that is what makes an excellent hard sci-fi. I love that.
Yes. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I have one really quick pointed question. We've got a couple for each of the individual authors. A lot of them are just repeats or saying that they love your works. I have one in here specific for RK. Who wasn't that? There we go. Miss Christian said, my son wants to know what your favorite Minecraft family character is to write.
Oh, that's a good question. I would have to say right now, my favorite is probably Bruce Lee, the Scarface Ninja attack kitty from Japan who smells like poop. He's the cat that the family accidentally had with them when they all woke up in Minecraft. And he's based off of a real life cat that I had that had gas problems. So he was pretty darn stinky. And but he was also like this cat that would always, sneak up on you and jump on you. So that's why he's a ninja. But he's really fun to write because he's nonverbal. I mean, everything he says is meow or purr, or he doesn't actually talk. He uses cat language. But he's also a ninja, so he'll go through and take out an entire pillager camp. And and then he'll end up using bad gas to take out some. It's kids' books, so it's really fun. He's one of my favorite characters to write because he gets to do a lot of cat things, like knocking stuff off of tables, or he'll just go to sleep in the middle of a combat when everybody's like, "What are you doing? We need your help." So he's my favorite to write. But I like writing all the family, and then the double E's are also really fun to write too, because they play off each other so well. They're brothers in the books that are constantly sniping at each other. And if anybody has kids, they know how often their kids are constantly sniping at each other. So they're a lot of fun to write too, and they're actually based off of my nephews in California.
Very, very cool. All right. I have another question anonymously here, and I believe this one's for everybody. Have you ever set up a rule early in a series and had it get out of control later on? And how do you address that? I know it's kind of a tough one, right? You're going to go back in order, Joseph?
I'll jump in. I haven't had that problem with these two yet. One of the biggest things that I do is game building first, and the game building is what builds the rest of it. So I stick pretty close to those rules when I start them up. But for my system Apocalypse, I'm playing it a lot more fast and loose and kind of just going with the flow. So when something changes the dynamic of the story, because of the nature of the it being a serial, it's very easy to just say, oh, that's fine, I'll just write another 100,000 words on that. And so I just kind of go with it. When it starts to break things, a system apocalypse, the point is to break things. So it's just fun, adds to it.
When I wrote the Primeverse trilogy, I went system first as opposed to story first. And I really kind of wrote out the entire system that I was like, what would be my favorite video game system to play? And so I went system first, which made it so that I didn't have many of those issues, thankfully, later on. And I think putting system first when I'm writing books, especially Minecraft's easy because I can just do all the research. But with my big person books, going system first really, really helps with kind of not ironing out all those kinks before I get to the end, and then I have to, do a word search and change 50 million words in a 180,000 novel.
If I can jump back in real quick, I remembered I actually did have that with my first book. And when I realized what a broken item I had placed into the game, I made it part of the climax of the story. And it was a big central featured part that is part of the whole series at this point. So when you break something like that, you do just kind of fold it in if you can. And
yeah,
I enjoyed it because it was just a game breaking item that a character figured out. That kind of thing happens. So write it in as such, and it'll work.
I deal with two of my series right now are working with other authors, so there's a lot of that. One of which I have zero control over. That's James's universe. The other, I'm the licenser, so it's my job to make sure it stays together. And the thing I usually bring up is little character, big universe, right? You need to make sure that your character has personal stakes and your character has an impact, but you need to not screw it up for everyone else. And I think when you're giving someone like a lazy gun from the Culture series, if anyone's familiar with that. I think it's great, but it needs to come with commensurate limitations. And if you always bring up limitations that are equal to the strength of the object, then you usually, even in a sum of things, if it gets out of control, it's usually more fun than it is problematic. So one of the things one of my characters picks up is a knife that does basically 50% of the target's damage. The health level is damage, right? So 2 hits, unless they've invested in stamina and constitution, they're going to die. But it's a dagger, which means that my super soft, squishy character, in order to be able to use it, needs to get within like this close to the character. And probably the other character is more than capable of one-shotting him because he wears light armor and he's, a magic user. So I think, in other places I've seen James use, he's made a weapon that can either kill a player permanently or send them to the underworld. It has a limited number of uses, and every time you use it, it damages one of your stats permanently. So I think as long as you keep that in mind, that anything strong needs to be matched with a massive weakness. And keeping in mind that your character is not the end all be all of this universe. Like I think in VGO, we follow about 5 characters per series. But we've stated that essentially the continent of Algard is twice the size of Spain and has about 140 million people on it. So even your 2 million player characters who have been ported in that have this huge impact are not the only thing going on. And it's very possible for an entire storyline to happen without your character having heard about it or being impacted by it. And the last one is, before I started the Fivefold universe as kind of a world that was purpose-built as something that other writers would come into, I talked to a lot of people who'd done media tie-in and worked with DC, with Star Trek, written in Star Wars, and I asked them, what's the one thing that I need to think about before I come into that? And a lot of them said the most important word in the world is no. And it's a little bit like killing other people's darlings, which I'm really comfortable with. But the other one is whenever you're dealing with a shared universe, because as soon as a shared universe, right, you have the butterfly effect on everything that you do and everything other authors do. The first thing that they told me was, don't let other people play where you do. So build enough distance between your characters and your stories and your plot lines that even if they blow up a planet, there's a little bit of a twinkle in the stars in the sky for your other characters, and otherwise, if they don't need to know about it, they don't. And I think that's the stuff that keeps you safe, is just little character, big universe.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
I love what you mentioned about balancing the items that you put into any game. That was everything that I've written so far, item balance, because I love building these great, fascinating, interesting items, but then you absolutely have to balance them because otherwise you break the game. So, for example, in Illusion, I crafted one of my characters likes to use a Magnum handgun. So I gave him a fancy one that essentially you can't make it suppressed. You can't hide with it. When you drop the ammunition, instead of just fading away, it turns into a cloud that follows you and provides other players. So if this character is stealth-based, and he loves using that heavy Magnum, but now they're going to know where you are, or they at least have a chance to find you more so than with suppressors. Things like that. I mean, that's exactly what you're saying. You must balance any heavy item that you put in.
Solid answer on that. All right, we've got a new one here from Jeff. Came in a few minutes ago, and it looks like so. This is a really good one that I wish was my question. So in sci-fi based LitRPG and things like that, how do you handle introducing magic into the system? Right? How do you explain that? How do you balance that with a very tech heavy kind of environment?
Well, I mean, the old standby of indecipherable from magic is there. You just scale it up, make it as fancy as you can. Base it on something, say, like take a 3D printer and then just say, what would that look like in 5,000 years, and get a replicator from Star Trek, right? It's easy enough to build from those bases, keep the original portion of it, and then present it as technology if you're going with that. But if you're using an actual magic system, which I have done in Delusion, build the system. I would say it's, even if it's for a single book, as this most likely is, it's worth building a system. I love building systems. So yeah, I don't necessarily explain it 100% to the reader, but there should be enough in there for them to grasp that, oh, this is, yeah. And it primarily, when I'm writing VR MMOs, it comes across as a game system more than a magic system. And that, I think, is important to focus on. If you're writing VR, Isekai, Portal Fantasies is a different story, and I haven't touched those yet. So.
Yeah, I mean, we all write LitRPG, so I think one of the things that binds us all together is the fact that we love systems. So, I look at it like, hey, if it's a thing that exists, there's probably rules behind it. It's not going to be some arbitrary, hand waviness. There's going to be some sort of system behind it, and it's always going to be something that can be researched and dug into and extrapolated upon. So in my personal opinion, I kind of look at the idea of magic as just another form of science, but it's just more esoteric, or, it's not requiring the same style of tools that are necessary.
Quick shout out to Jeff, by the way. That guy's an awesome reader.
Oh, yeah.
Seen him for years in the groups. So.
I'd refer to a couple good ones. One is gravity effects in Mass Effect, where people have, due to exposure to zero element radiation, an ability to manipulate gravity, and then they have implants that enhance that ability. I'd also talk about, what was that? There's a video game that was based off Norse mythology, where you were Baldur. And based on your equipment, you had different skills. And the one controversial thing that I throw out there, and I don't know if the crowd or the authors will agree with me, but I think the Star Wars video games are in many ways superior to the movies. When it comes to and I think part of that is because it imposes a system and rules on it. Like, some of the best lightsaber and force wielding battles that I've ever seen on a screen have been in the Jedi Knight series. I adored The Force Unleashed. The Force Awakens lately has been found. Old Republic, fantastic, and so very close to our LitRPG world. I think those systems not only forced a certain rigor to the magic, but also because of that system being in place, it led to them telling better stories than just, ooh, it's magic. You can't.
When you have a system, you have rules that you can follow, and that with those guidelines, you can actually be more creative.
Yeah, absolutely. And it leads to consequences, like real consequences, right? Like you don't just skip jump a ship. You have to work your way out of the problem that you would have just skip jumped your way out of.
It's like you were saying earlier, it gives you bottlenecks. And anytime there's bottlenecks, you get conflict, and conflict is good for storytellers.
Absolutely.
One
of the authors that I've seen that does this really well, and I don't hear about him quite as often as I would love to, it's Moderator, who wrote the Recluse series, the Imager portfolio. All his worlds are usually far future. They're post-apoc, or they're on other planets, and yet they have magic in them. And what he does is he hints at the science behind them, but he never fully explains it. And I think that's what differentiates science, where you can go down and talk about the widget and the discombobulator and how the condenser brings forward the lightning. And Moderator just hints at these are the underlying principles that may be somewhat mystical that drive this, and you can sense that there's a rule-based system behind it, but he never fully explains it because it's magic.
I love that.
It's a neat balance.
I love that system, and I didn't know about the guy, but I'm actually using that in a pure sci-fi side series that I'm doing, where the character that you are experiencing this world through is essentially a caveman, and so you're not going to understand any of the science that's going into what he's experiencing, but it is all science. And the creature that's attempting to explain these elements to him can't explain them because he's a caveman. And so you get the starting from that basis, you can go up to book 9 and he's an astrophysicist because he's learned all these things. And then you can fill in the gaps and fully explain it. But as long as you have something that is, like you said, a placeholder, a marker, here's where the tech is, and this is where your understanding of it falls through, it tends to work. And I love that system. It's an excellent methodology.
So where in the series does he become a caveman lawyer?
No. 8 or 9.
That's your Phil Hartman shout out.
Yes. Phil Hartman. I'm still upset about Phil Hartman. That's okay. One of my favorites.
And another thing to mention, probably, which I think is just as important, is that science is ultimately just stuff that hasn't been disproven yet, right? So we are taking a lot of this stuff on faith in the first place. So the boundary between science and magic, when we really get down to it, and we realize how often in the academic world things get disproven, reproven, re-explained, found out that they were wrong, and then put back together. I think it's just a question of measures of control. But aside from that, yeah, I think if we're writing, we need to know what's behind it, whether we put it on the page or not.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Yep. All right. We have a question from Charles Owen to all of you. Where do you see the genre going? A lot of nuance happening. A lot of kind of sub niches coming out with the post-apocalypse, the cultivation crossover, sci-fi crossovers. Mm-hmm. Where do you see the genre going?
Go on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I definitely see sci-fi expanding. I definitely see the subgenres, and that's the thing, is the subgenres lift and raise and lower depending on the day. And Isekai Portal seems to be in the lead, and we'll see if that's the case in 3 years, right? So it'll continuously shift, but the prevalence of video gaming as an entertainment medium will keep this genre relevant for the foreseeable. As long as there's video gaming, we'll write books about it. So, go ahead.
Solid answer.
This is one of my favorite genres, and having, dove into it from almost the beginning, it's great to see the stylistic changes that have happened. It started with a lot of VR MMO, and now it's, you know, kind of moving away from VR MMO. You know, it's really prevalent still, and it's one of my favorite genres. But you know, you see a lot more isekai, you see a lot more system apocalypse, and honestly, I see it just growing. So all of these little niches getting more and more popular. I would love to see more kids books come out, because we got to capture the future generations, you know, get them started early on LitRPG and game lit, so that this genre can grow even more. And that's one of the reasons why I write the kids books that I do write. I've got an active fan base now that's pretty much locked in. So my next step, going from pure Minecraft series, is to take them into a style of LitRPG game lit that isn't based in Minecraft, but, you know, still has all the gaming elements, so that they can feel like they're getting that progression fantasy, and they're getting into a genre that, as they grow up, they can just start diving into more and more books. And there's other authors out there that write in kind of a YA style, so they have more stuff to really grow with. You know, Jay Boyce's books, my 10-year-olds read, and, you know, they really love them. So there's a lot of good stuff out there, and that's my hope and dream for growth in the genre, is to see it widen out to a larger age group, so we can get, you know, capture more audience.
More accessibility. Yes.
Yeah.
For me, I think I'd focus more on the means. You know, the big bomb that we're all waiting for is when mainstream publication starts getting into a LitRPG, if they can. That would be a big shift, right? Not just because they might do it better or worse than the existing authors do, but I think the means by which they would choose topics, the market research, the types of people they would throw at deciding what books to publish, would lead to different choices than necessarily your indie authors who, you know, write what makes them smile and interest them, and you know, based off what they've been talking to fans at cons with, or in events like this. I think that could lead to some very different choices. I think also what we should be looking at as specifically LitRPG authors is what are other media in which LitRPG is applicable, right? I mean, there's not that terribly much difference between us and game writers, except game writers are more constrained by, okay, well, we only get 10% of this game to actually tell a story, and the rest is someone mashing buttons. But I think when it comes to interactive fiction, when it comes to, you know, I've seen games right now that are walking simulators with sci-fi stories in them. I've seen, you know, kind of the future of choose your own adventures when it comes to Telltale games. There's a lot of crossover room. Was it one of the guys I was talking to at Dragon Con was talking about he's making a video game. It's a pixel art game called Line, I think, or something like that. I can't remember. I need to look it up again. But it's, you know, how do we as independent indie authors who have such a close tie into digital take our stuff to new channels and therefore strengthen our businesses and make it more proof to that moment, which inevitably will happen where some publisher is going to decide to get into this.
I think that's the thing to keep in mind most about the genre, is that, you know, to all of us that are immersed in it, it feels deep and wide, but in reality, it's a very tiny genre still. And so it's going to take, you know, those big blockbusters or, you know, someone to dive into it that's a more known author, or a game to come out, or, you know, we had Free Guy that just came out, and that was pretty similar. There was a lot of, what? Games don't work that way, or the system behind it was very, very hand wavy, but it was a really fun story, and that was, you see that, and you see Ready Player One and Tron and all these things that are becoming more and more popular. But right now the genre is still really, really small, so the only way we have to go is up.
Agreed.
Slime Evo was the game by Jeffrey Falcon Loeb.
Slime.
I've looked into that. I'm gonna grab it now.
Yeah, and even Marcus Sloss, who's he writes a ton of different books. He just put out a game on Steam right now that he had done, which is, it's a harem game, but he's putting out stuff. You've got these authors that are diving into pushing stuff out into the different branches of media also, which is really fun to see happen.
I would love to turn my work into a graphic novel someday. That I think would fly in this genre.
Tao did that with System Apocalypse, and that was really cool.
Absolutely. All right, we've got one more. This one's kind of workshoppy a little bit. They're curious about when you're starting a series. Are you setting out the world and the systems in Excel files? I know DJ, you said you've already got, you've got one that's ever evolving, kind of always open, right?
Yeah. Well, not to bump the order. When I started the Fivefold universe, I started with a 50-page PowerPoint that delineated all the rules on economy, time travel, where you can build stuff, where you can't, what are the major governmental systems. Basically when you think of it as what is the bumper bowling that's going to let the author land a strike. And that's kind of what I think of in terms of starting. And then after that, I think when it comes to either doing a really long series or working with several authors, it's a question of one of the things I always bring in mind is that the human brain is able to integrate a whole lot of data subconsciously and only express a tiny little bit of that consciously. So someone has to read all the books, and someone needs to look at them and say, this feels right, this doesn't feel right. Oh, have you thought of this? And we haven't quite found a better system than that, than either a lore master or a really invested creator or someone. And the more the series grows, the harder that gets, but that's the only way I can think of these days. Is you need someone to have all that in their head.
Obsessive attention to detail.
Yep.
I personally take a lot of notes and do that thing where I just allow my brain to break and focus on nothing but that for a week at a time. And then good friend of mine and author in the genre, Damian Hansen, who I'm collaborating with on that System Apocalypse story. He is an excellent sounding board. Oh yeah,
that's awesome. He's great.
He's a great sounding board because he'll either just shoot you down and say, you're a crazy person, don't do that, or this has potential, let's talk. Right. So a good brainstorm partner is invaluable in that. And then just, I've got notes that fill maybe half of one of these that are just series wide notes, and go back through and read them occasionally and just refresh yourself. Oh, that's right, I can't do this. Darn, never mind. Stuff like that helps a lot, but I'm terrible at Excel. And this one, my first, is far crunchier than this one. I quickly learned that's a very specific skill set. So,
and the genre tends to be leaning to more of a creamy style anyway, rather than crunchy. I see that becoming the way of the future right now, and it might go back, but definitely seems that way. When I start out my systems, I like to make board and card games. Also, I'm a huge board game and card game fan. So when I make my systems, I won't use Excel right away. I'll actually start by doing baseline notes, and then I'll actually write rules like I would if I'm writing a rule book for a game. Which just, that's just how I help organize my own thoughts. But it really helps me to get that down. And then when I'm in the shower, because that's where all your best thoughts come, I'll realize, okay, this rule doesn't make any sense. I'm going to have to throw it away. No matter how much I love it and I love the concept, it's got to go in order for this to be able to work. So I actually like to do it. Start with the system, and then I like to write it like a rule book, and then move on from that point.
If I can jump in, that rule book sounds like something I would want to read if I had extensive knowledge of your systems. I mean, it's personal notes now, right? But at the end of a system, at an end of a series, you might want to just consider, go through it, clean it up, publish, right?
I mean, there's some authors have done that too.
And
they put out their systems as TTRPGs, which is really, really cool.
Yep,
someday, right? That's another one of those mediums where exactly. I think all of us would love to own our own RPG, tabletop RPG.
Yeah. Boy, tell me about it. That'd be fun.
Mm-hmm.
I was just remembering one of the other things we did was where James and I are working on a series that takes place 17 years after the main series of VGO. And we break a lot of rules in it, and intentionally, and naturally unintentionally, because you're trying to recap about 21 books, and try to put all the pieces together for all of them. So one of the things we did was, after we finished the first 2 acts of it, so it's an episodic thing. We handed it over to one of our super readers and said, "Hey, we just want you to highlight every single place where you think we've broken the rules, and then we're going to go through and make the decision. Right? Are we going to not break that rule? Are we going to deliberately break it and explain why, or are we going to come up with something else?" So that's another path of it, where you're writing fast, you're trying to stick to it as much as possible, but again, for me, the human mind is more complex than anything we can throw at any rule system. So sometimes the best thing is just throw it in the blender, hit the button, and see what happens.
Let them fill in the blanks on themselves. Yeah, that makes sense.
And this is also a great place to have a really good editor too. On my latest book, End of Earth, the System Apocalypse, it's going to be a standalone. You're using a really good editor who's able to point out, hey, this isn't consistent with this. And then when I wrote the System Apocalypse short story, Tao's got an editor team that he was using that was just fantastic and was able to the system works like this and it does this when people are brought into the system. So having those editors to kind of be your little backup, net is really helpful also. I was grateful with Minecraft because I just have a Wikipedia and I can find all the rules that I need right there. Or I can just open up the game and have stuff happen in there too.
Yeah, that's solid. All right, so I think we've got one last question here I saw. Editors and beta readers are gold, Dawn. You are correct.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Those guys are great.
Yeah.
All right. The last one here, again from Jeff, is if you guys could spend, a couple minutes each just letting us know about works you have upcoming. I know we've kind of mentioned them throughout the conversation, but just again in order, just let us know what do you have on the books?
So currently I'm working on book 3 of this series, working title Mirage. It will be returning to this game system and on a different server. And I like to put different characters on the stars of my series. At this point, it's kind of just an experimental thing I'm trying for character building, and I really enjoyed it for this series. So book 3 will be featuring a different main character again. So you get to see all the same characters, all the same players fulfilling their same roles, just this one, they're in a Wild West theme. So how do those classes that they played in this translate to the Wild West, right? Stuff like that. And then translate back to a different server with a different play style in a different culture. So it's going to be a different gaming culture. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And then I've got my side series, which is a straight sci-fi, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. It's a far post-apocalypse, just kind of trying to piece together what happened to this world and why it is the way it is. And I love doing that kind of stuff. And then my system apocalypse that I am working on with the awesome Damian Hansen is going to be slice of life, very much just day by day in these people's lives. How does it fall apart? Why does it fall apart? What is the nature of this system? And it's a lot of fun because I get to take these lovely high concept sci-fi things and just drag them down to my system apocalypse and ruin them for everybody. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And that should, like I said, that should be getting posted probably by the end of the year. We'll have it up on Railroad and Patreon. So
that's fun.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I am working on a book called End of Earth, which is going to come out November, December sometime. It's in editing right now, which is a system apocalypse with cultivation. Cultivation's like my new jam. I've been really getting into a lot of the progression fantasy cultivation style books, but I took the cultivation kind of more into a system style. Dakota Kraut does an amazing job with how he set up how, you have your cores, and then he dives into the science of, they're sitting down and they're peeling back the layers and infusing the mana and then compressing it. And so I do a little bit of that, not quite as heavy as him, but everything breaks down. But it's it's kind of more of a Avatar: The Last Airbender style, where they're cultivating elements, and those elements have an effect on your body and mind and all that kind of stuff. And I'm really looking forward to that coming out. It's going to be a heck of a lot of fun with a bunch of crazy monsters, and it's going to be a standalone. And then I've, of course, got my Minecraft series, which I'm going to branch that out into another kids Minecraft series where we're going to kind of do incorporate a whole Pokemon element to it also, because Pokemon's insanely popular with kids also.
Delicious.
So it's going to be, it's going to be Pokemon in Minecraft. So that's going to be a lot of fun. That's probably going to be around the first of the year when that starts popping out.
Let me know if you need an alpha reader.
I will.
On my side, what we've got going right now is we've launched a Kickstarter. So there's 14 days left on it. And it's for a card game that was built into the Viridian Gate Online series. So in Viridian Gate Online, they play a card game. We actually made the cards. So you can see all
gorgeous.
of them illustrated, including the individual face and pit cards. And it's a full 54 card deck. You can find that on gentlemanswar.com. So it's the singular form of gentleman, GENTLEMANS war.com. You can also find us on Kickstarter if you just search for Gentleman's War. We've got the full card game there. And as part of that, I'm actually writing a novella that's set 300 years before Cataclysm and the Illusionist, which talks about how Gentleman's War was invented, how the Thieves Union was founded, and why it's such a weird thieves guild to begin with. So if you like characters like Cutter, if you like characters like Alan and how they've gone through the thiefliness challenges in the Illusionist, the novella is going to talk about how that actually came to be. I'm going to have written The Illusionist 4 by the end of the year. So I'm actually writing the first of 2 boss fights right now. So the book is almost done. I'm at 75,000 words of probably 85,000 words. And that will be done and in copy edits by November and probably out by December. Again, up to the publication gods for that, but it's there. For those of you who've been following, I do have a third of a Nil Origin Story. So Nil is the mimic from the second book in the Illusionist series. Also has a dog called Nasher. One of the favorite characters in the whole series, and actually in the Gentleman's War deck, I have a card that is me, and it's the mimic because that was such a popular character. But I'll see if I can find that. Going into next year for the Fivefold Universe, I'm going to be putting out a series of novellas. So if you think of Star Wars: The Old Republic, I'm doing that for the Fivefold Universe, where it's the second interstellar war. And we're going to be going through with 5 or 6 pretty relatively medium to big name authors writing in that series. And we'll also have the next Fivefold books going with here's the card. So this was the mimic card, Nil and Nasher. So we've got a lot coming. I could just get my card on a mug. So I think there's a lot of fun stuff coming. Pop on my website. I just did a live on my Facebook as well about the Gentleman's War thing, and I did a reading from the novella. So if you want to see how that's going, there's a lot of channels to see it.
That's crazy. You guys are all very, very busy, but I'm looking forward to all of those. Thank you all, gentlemen, for participating in the panel and dealing with my stumbliness. Lots of fun. Looking forward to all the things you guys have coming out. For those of you listening in, if you'd like to continue to discuss this, please visit the Discord where the conversations will continue on. And we also are doing a giveaway. And I would like to share with you that code word, which is world is. The code word for the giveaway is world is. 2 word. So if you're participating in that, please grab that. And again, thank you all for being a part of the panel here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I want to say thanks to you and to Almiron and Geneva for getting this going. You know, I can't wait to see where this LitCon's going to go in the future, and it's just awesome to be a part of it, and hopefully continue to be a part of it as the years go by.
Agreed.
Is anybody else doing an author takeover, by the way?
Yeah, I'm doing one on Monday.
Okay. I'm on Monday too at 2 p.m. If anyone wants, ask me anything.
And real quick, just because I'm new at all of this, I forgot to put my name on there. It's Joseph Phelps if you're looking for my work. Sorry about that. Nice to meet everybody.